raising up. I think teachers all assist in our upbringing,
Yeah, I think
The thing is that we recognize, and the good teachers and the good parents always recognize this, so I'm not telling anybody anything new, but there's something inside each one of those children that become teenagers. There's something inside each one of them that if you recognize, just stop for a moment and recognize it and nurture it, it'll be the best thing you could ever have done for that young person to fully blossom and fully become the person they want to become.
Exactly.
Kari O'Driscoll gets this. She has written a book that absolutely is going to help anybody raising or teaching, especially teenagers. Her book is called One Teenager at a Time, Developing Self-Awareness and Critical Thinking in Adolescence. Kari O'Driscoll volunteers with the food bank. She writes about social justice issues, parenting, mental health, medical ethics. You get the picture. She's obviously somebody who's out to do good things for other people, and that is something I love. Kari O'Driscoll, thank you so much for being on the air with us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Seattle, Washington.
You got up early to be with us. So when you were a little girl, did somebody take video or home movies of you?
There are lots of slide carousels.
Okay.
I don't know if there's video.
Okay, but does it show you, are there hints when you were a child that they tell you or could have told an adult what you were going to become?
I don't know, honestly. I have older brothers, and I was always trying to keep up with them. So, and, we grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So we were outside all the time, running around, climbing trees, playing hide and seek and stuff. But I was definitely a bookworm, and I was really, really interested in science, anything scientific or experimental. So for a long time, I told people I wanted to be a doctor. But I've always had a love of books and reading.
So how did you get such great insight into the inner core of who we are and who we become?
I think it was a combination of things. My parents were divorced when I was about 8 years old, and I was really close to my siblings because of that. And then as I grew up, the one thing that became super important to me was advocating for us as kids, because with my parents' divorce, they were both busy with a lot of other things, and so we were kind of left to our devices. And I think that that's sort of the one through line that runs through all of the different jobs I've had, different things I've done, is finding people who need a little boost in being advocated for, a little help finding their voice.
Who gave you that boost?
My dad's second wife was pretty instrumental in that. She was one of the first adults that I can remember actually listening to me and taking me seriously. And one of the things that I quote in the book is actually a Gloria Steinem quote, where she says, as soon as you listen to someone, they start to believe they actually have something to say.
Oh, I love that.
And that's a wonderful thing about your book, too, is you do have quotes, usually just one line by famous people, and it really hits home on the topic of the section that you have the quotes in.
Right, and that's one of the things that I really tried to do when I was writing this book, is pull together sort of disparate information that's out there from a lot of different people. So Brene Brown, Gloria Steinem, Dan Siegel, lots of different really smart, amazing people, and sort of connect the dots.
Mm-hmm. And it makes, it helps the parent kind of have like a hands-off approach to the teenager, because the teenager has to grow and discover their own self-worth and their own creativity, as opposed to thinking they have to be a mini-me for either their dad or their mom.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important.
The interaction that we have as an adult with the child, it changes as we get older. The parent to the grandparent, for example, sometimes you've heard this before, not that this applies to me, but I'm not old enough. I'm getting close though. I'm already a grandpa, but the baby's only 7 months old, or 9 months old already, right?
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes we have an opportunity as adults, as older adults, to have that same kind of impact that we wish we had with our own children.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot easier, I think, to take somebody else's kid and see them for who they are than when you're in the trenches of parenting, right? There's so much pressure as the parent of this child to do everything, quote unquote, right. And I think by the time you get to be a grandparent, or if you're an aunt or uncle, or, just a mentor or a coach, you're not quite in and invested to that kid in the same way.
Well, you talk about,
so you have a little more freedom.
You talk about the role-playing exercises and the journaling.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important way. One thing that we know about people, or that we're starting to learn about people, is everybody had a little bit different communication style and learning style. And so part of the book deals with it. The goal is to be able to address lots of different learning and communication styles to make this material accessible to everyone. And so if you're incredibly socially driven, say you're a really extroverted teenager, there's some sort of role-playing or activity things that might be the key to bringing a concept home to you. Whereas if you're someone who's a little bit more introverted, or you need more time, or you process things by reading and writing, then maybe the journaling exercise is going to be that aha moment for you.
Well, would the book help the adult, the parent, the teacher, the grandparent? Would the book help that person be able to have empathy for a teenager, for example, that has his heart or her heart broken because their crush doesn't reciprocate, or because they're not as good at basketball as they want to be, and everybody else seems to be better than them? And does technology today sometimes, is there a barrier if we're not familiar with, for example, Snapchat and things like that the kids use?
So I think that's two separate questions.
Yeah, I know.
The first question is, I think, yeah, absolutely, it can be helpful to, a lot of times as someone who cares about somebody else, we want to rush in and fix. We want to say to them, you're just as good as everybody else, or I'm going to yell at that coach for you, or,
right.
Whereas this book really advocates more of a lead by curiosity approach. Let's help that person process this on their own, right? I'm going to let you know that I get that this is a really painful experience, and I'm so sorry, and I'm going to be here for you while you ask yourself some questions so that you can come to the conclusion that, now, it doesn't really matter if I'm not the best baseball player, because I'm also really good at this other thing, or I can get better at baseball, and here's how. So I think in that way, it's really helpful. We can help kids process their emotions without rushing in and doing it for them, but being there as a supportive adult while they're doing that hard work is really, really important. And I think this book teaches you how to do that. And then to the technology question, one of the things that I have discovered that works really well with teenagers is, if there is a barrier, whether it's technology, or maybe your kid is like an amazing lacrosse player and you know absolutely nothing about lacrosse, a really cool thing to do is to ask them to teach you about it. Because when we give teenagers, if we give teenagers the opportunity to be an expert at something, that feels really great to them.
Very smart.
They spend most of their day being told what they need to learn and what they don't already know and what they're not good at. And so an awesome way to create a connection with them is to say, I don't have any idea what TikTok is. Can you show me what that is and why people use it?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
You stress kindness in your book also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think teenagers get a bad rap. I think that we tend to have this knee-jerk response or this assumption that they are trying to be manipulative, that they're trying to get what they want from us, that they're sneaking around and lying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can start off with assuming good intent and really being kind to them and understand the context in which they're living right now. Their brains are not fully formed. They're bathed in emotional hormones. They're being asked to go to 6 or 7 or 8 different periods of classes a day and excel in all of them, plus do extracurricular activities and find something that's going to get them into college and do these service hours, and maybe they have to work, and then they also have chores at home, and oh wait, you got to get your driver's license too. I mean, anybody's going to be kind of cranky.
So a lot on the plate.
Yeah, we really are. We really do ask our kids a lot, and the older they get, the farther they get into adolescence, the more we ask them to do. And I think if we can really just be kind and assume that everybody's doing their best, that goes a lot of the way toward creating a connection.
And that also leads to finding the joy, because each person has to have joy.
Exactly.
Within themselves.
And yep, there are several different lessons in the book about how do we find that joy? Because again, like I said before, kids are being told pretty much all day, every day, what you're not good at, where you're lacking, and frankly, as human beings, we're wired to look at the gaps and the negative things and the things that might be scary. And so if we can start to train our brains to acknowledge the things that give us joy and seek those things out and spend a little bit of time every day doing those things, then we're going to be way better off. But I think we don't spend any time teaching people how to do that. And so that's why I talk about it in the book.
Kari O'Driscoll is our guest. Her book is called One Teenager at a Time, and if you're a parent and you have 5 teenagers under the same roof, you've got your plate full as much as the teenager, his or herself. Does let's see, rebelliousness against like the family religion? Let's say I'm in the 7th grade or something, and I've been brought up in the church, and all of a sudden I'm starting to. I don't know that I'm buying any of this. Now, my dad's going to be furious with me, or my mom. Somebody's going to be mad at me for questioning the thing that I've been brought up with. And I'm not trying to pick sides in my question by asking the question, as much as I'm just wondering what would that parent do to at least keep peace between the teen and the parent. Did we lose you?
Maybe she's calling
Kari?
back. I think the phone is ringing again.
Kari, did we lose you?
Oh, yeah, sorry, not sure what happened.
Oh my gosh, okay. Look, I don't know if you heard the question. Did you?
I didn't.
Okay.
I just heard you talking about the book again, but I didn't hear
Okay.
the question.
Well, let me just repeat the question is this. Let's say I'm the child, I'm the adolescent, and I'm in 7th grade, and all my life I've been brought up with a certain religion. And by the way, this is not me. This did not happen to me, but I've seen it in other people. Mm-hmm. And the parents are now a little bit angry because, we brought you up with this religion. Why do you suddenly question it, So I'm not asking you to teach us how to teach religion as much as how to keep peace in the family when one of us becomes rebellious, or one of the children or teenagers becomes rebellious regarding a family tradition or something of that sort. How do you keep the peace?
It's hard, especially if you are trying to hope that child is leading by example for their siblings. But I think one thing that's really important to know is kind of to look at the long game here. If the goal is to have a trusting, loving relationship with your child, and if the other goal is to have that child be a person who is curious and confident and can make their way in the world with some level of critical thinking, then we want them to question things. We don't want them to question things just because they're being pissy and they're rebelling,
right.
But we do want them to ask critical questions. And that said, if they're questioning a value that you deeply hold as a parent, it's really hard to unhook from that and not get defensive. But this is what kids that age are wired to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's the same thing I think with fashion, like long hair, short hair, no hair, tattoos, piercings, ripped jeans, pink,
colored hair.
I mean, there's so many things that a parent has to say. Well, they're not hurting anybody. I don't know. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, if we want our kids to be able to grow up and make decisions for themselves someday, we have to give them practice doing that. And if we can give them opportunities to practice doing that when they are still living with us in this safe, loving space, then they can also experience the consequences of those things in that safe, loving space. So my youngest daughter decided she wanted to chop all her hair off and color the rest of it this bright neon red when she was in the 5th grade. And I thought, okay, she's just starting a new school. You know, I don't know what's going to happen sort of socially. You know, we talked about, are you trying to solve something? Are you trying to get attention? Like, why? That's always my first question, is what is the motivation behind this? And if it feels like it's not a self-harming motivation, then for the most part, I'm like, okay, we'll try that and see how that works for you. You know?
You have something in there that's very intriguing, is walking meditation.
Yeah. And I think that's another way to try to access this practice and just sort of slowing down and paying attention. Because we're all like racing from place to place. And even when we're physically in one place, most of us, our brains are in the next thing we're supposed to be doing. You know, we see, you know, if you're on the subway, if you're in an Uber, even if you're driving, like you're annoyed with the point A to point B, you just want to be at B. And walking meditation for me is a really quick way. I mean, it can take 5 minutes, or you can be out there for 45 minutes, whatever. But it's a really great way to sort of give your brain a vacation from multitasking.
That's a good idea.
Did your self project come before the book, or was it?
It did. I mean, it's hard to say. It took me about 7 years to research the material for the book and write it and put it all together. I had several guinea pigs. I have 2 teenagers myself, and all of their friends were my guinea pigs. And then I did a couple pilot projects as well. So I never really set out to write a book. I was really just writing a series of things that I could use with kids and that I could offer to schools and youth groups in my area to work with kids this age, because I saw that missing from the other activities that they were doing, whether it was school or sports or whatever. But then about a year ago, a friend of mine said, this is like really cool, and I know somebody who would want to put this together and publish it as a book. So the Self Project really just started as a way to help parents of adolescents and educators of adolescents understand where the gaps are. We're not teaching adolescents how to be human beings. We're teaching them lots of other things, but we're not teaching them how to be humans.
If you could go back in time to the parents of Romeo and Juliet, what would you say to them so that they don't kill themselves? Because I'm guessing that happens today, right? 2 adolescents, they fall in love and their families don't like each other for one reason or another. Maybe there's racial differences or cultural differences or whatever. And then the kids are the ones who end up being hurt or hurting themselves.
Right. And I mean, I think, as goofy as the question as that is, I think you're right. I think it illustrates a really good point, which is adolescents have this drive to separate from your families. but they want to do that over a period of time, and they never want to do it 100%. And I mean, family is your first home, really, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you become someone, or you want to become someone, or you fall in love with someone, and your family / first home rejects that feels like a rejection of you.
Yeah.
And so whether it is, I love this person, whether it is, my gender is not actually the gender you think it is, you know, I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be an artist, you know, whoever that teenager is becoming, if you as their parent, as their safe harbor, say to them, nope, I reject you, or I reject that, that's devastating.
Yeah.
And so I think it's harsh, you know. I don't think we think about it that way. As parents, a lot of times I think we feel that that's a great way to control behavior. Like if I say, no, you can't be with that person.
Right.
But the message we're sending is, I'm rejecting you.
There was a story on the radio yesterday, one of the other shows, and they were talking about how this father was trying to feed his baby, and the baby wouldn't eat. So he took the baby's doll, and he said to the baby doll, come on, eat. And of course the baby doll wouldn't eat, so he punched the baby doll in the face. And the baby saw what happened to the doll and then ate. And that was the solution of how to get the baby to eat. And I thought that is not a good way to do that.
No.
And so, but in a way, it's the same thing as telling your daughter you're dating a loser. You know, it's. I think to do it in a loving way, whether you're trying to feed or guide. I think I think your idea is better than maybe what society has taught us how to handle these things.
Well, I mean, I think there's so much emphasis placed on control, right? Who has the power in this relationship? And in some cases, it's absolutely vital. You know, when you've got this toddler who's getting ready to run into traffic, reach out and grab them and physically restrain them, right? But when you have a teenager who is saying to you, you know, I can't do this. This is not who I am. We need to let go of control. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a time period where we want them to learn how to do things on their own. And our job is to mind the levees and let them bounce around as freely as they can in between those. Yeah. And let them know that we are the levees. We're safe. You just do your thing, and we're going to help pick you up when you fall. And at some point when you leave, you will have learned how to make these decisions, or at least how to deal with the consequences on your own.
Kari O'Driscoll, thank you so much for being on the air with us. One Teenager at a Time is the book. I found it on Amazon. Do you have a website?
I do. It's theselfproject.com.
Theselfproject.com. Kari, thank you so much for being on the show. Good stuff.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump compares them to spies, people who told a whistleblower about his request to have Joe Biden investigated in Ukraine. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff calls that witness intimidation.
Schiff tweeting, the president's suggestion that those involved in the whistleblower complaint should be dealt with as we used to do for spies and treason is a reprehensible invitation to violence against witnesses in our investigation.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland, White House spokesman Hogan Gidley.
These leaks are dangerous. People in this government are entrusted with secure, sensitive information.
He was on Fox and Friends, and Gidley calls it a flat-out lie as Iran's President Hassan Rouhani claims that the Trump administration offered to remove economic sanctions in exchange for new talks being held. President Trump tweets about the claim, Iran wanted me to lift the sanctions imposed on them in order to meet. I said, of course, no. America's listening to Fox News.